Hi, Will from Fologram here. In this tutorial we're going to look at the track drag component in a tiny bit more depth in order to build a drawing application which lets you draw multiple curves at once. So when we were explaining the track drag component in an earlier tutorial, you would have noticed that as soon as you start a new drag, that chain of hand positions will refresh and the old drag will no longer appear. So we'd like to build a tool where when you start a new drag, the old drag is baked into Rhino or saved to a list in Grasshopper so that you can still see it. It'll let you model some much more interesting things using that drag component. So to get started, connect up your headset. And we're going to go to the Fologram tools, interact, track drag. And to begin with, we're going to make the exact same curve drawing tool that we did before. So I'll take an XY plane and transform it with the list of chain of hand positions. So we get all of those planes as I drag my hand around. There they are. I'm going to plug those into a curve. Great. And hide the planes. So as I draw a new or perform a new drag, the old positions are deleted, we get some new positions. What I want to do now is I want to essentially save or record this curve only when I finish the drag. And to do that, I'm going to use one of the tools in our utilities toolbar called the conditional data dam, which will let me get this curve through to a subsequent bit of my Grasshopper definition only when a specific condition is met. So I'm going to create one of these, drop it down. It's a fairly simple component, though you can use it to perform really complex things. So all it does is it's like a little wall. Any object that you plug in here to this 0 parameter, I'm going to plug in my curve, will only be passed through to the corresponding output parameter if the condition here is set to true. Okay, so if this is set to false, this component just never updates. The outputs don't update. Anything connected to it also won't update. It's a dam on the data flowing through your model. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the state of our drag component to determine whether or not to allow this data through. So while I'm dragging, I don't want any data to come through. When I finish dragging, I want this component to update once. I'll explain why in a second. So I'm going to create a Boolean. Now the state parameter is true while I'm dragging, false while I'm not. I want to let this data through the opposite way. So I want to let it through when I'm not dragging and damn it when I am. So I'm going to connect it up to a Boolean, right click on this and go invert, which just flips that value and connect that up as our pass-through parameter. Now I'm going to right click on the dam, and this isn't, well, it depends on the application that you're building. In this case it doesn't really matter too much, but in a lot of cases it will. I'm only going to allow that data through once. So what that means is if this component is updating lots and this is set to true, this isn't going to update all the time. It's only going to update once as soon as this is set to true, and then after that it won't update. It won't keep updating. So I'm going to set that to allow once. Now what we have here is this output parameter of the curve, which is exactly what I plugged in here. It's going to update once when I finish dragging. So I'm going to connect that to a data recorder, and you'll see what happens. Every time I create a new curve, the previous curves are saved. We don't get a massive long list of things. It's only saving them once with the data recorder when we finish dragging. So now we could connect this up to a mesh pipe and send it to the HoloLens. And I'm going to turn on my HoloLens display in order to draw over and over again. Now you notice there's one thing missing here, which is that while we're drawing, we don't see anything. So that's a bit of a problem. So I'm going to also mesh pipe the curve before the data dam and send that over to the HoloLens. And just for fun, I'm going to give that a different color. So while we're dragging, the curve is going to be red, and then as soon as we finish, it'll sort of save it and change it to white. And just to make the video a little bit clearer, I've forgotten to do this for some of the other ones, I'm going to assign a nice shiny white material to those other curves. Okay, so now in the HoloLens, the curve we're drawing looks nice and red. As soon as we draw a new curve, it goes back to being white and saves it into our model.